All right, so welcome again to the PM Hive Podcast. Today is episode 7. Today I have Samuel with me as a guest, not in our usual place this time, but we're actually recording out of my own little home here in our little kind of home-built studio. And today, Samuel actually comes from a European background in product management, and he's currently working as one here in Vancouver. And so today there's a lot of questions related to both cultural differences as well as the work experience differences in the product management setting, but also in program, project, and stuff adjacent to that role. And I just wanted to give Samuel his kind of introduction. Feel free to talk about yourself and what your background is like to everyone today.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Samuel. I'm currently a senior product consultant for Lululemon, working on their AI strategy for the social media space. I have about 6 years of experience in the product space. Before that, I worked for a startup in France called Brut, and I built a B2B AI solution branch for the company for about 4 years. Before that, I worked at Amazon for a little bit. Before that, I studied. I haven't been working for so long. I studied actually literature when I started, so completely really far away from tech. And I contemplated a public career in diplomacy for a while, and then realized after working for the French Ministry of Defense that it wasn't for me. Studied in the US for a while, studied at Columbia in New York, did my master's there, studied business, shifted to media, and from media shifted to tech. So I entered my past company as we could say like an analytic PM, but honestly, I was really a data analyst. I was in charge of like a product roadmap on the data space for a company. I was pretty early stage. We were only 2 in the data team, and now I think they're like 15 people. But that's kind of like how I got into the tech space. And then from there, from a series of like serendipitous or whatever you call it, hazards, I guess, I got into the PM life and product. And yeah, that's how I got into the space about 5 years ago.
So you said, first of all, I know like there's abundant questions we want to jump into, but you said that you did your master's in NYC, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So you worked before in Paris before you decided to go over to North America for your master's, or?
No, so the thing is, in France, it's a bit special. Basically, in the French work market,
Yeah.
if you want to like start a career in like I don't know, like a tech company, or like, it's really hard to do it with a bachelor degree. So I know that's gonna sound really weird, but a lot of French people choose to go all the way through the master's degree before they start working.
Oh, wow.
Which makes no sense. Like, hear me out. Like, I don't think this is a good way to look at it. I think it's a lot of time that you spend, studying, which is obviously great at the end, but you should be able to work before you do that. So some people choose to do that. Some people do great with just an undergrad, but a lot of us go all the way through the master's degree just so that we can find work. So yeah.
Gotcha. Would you say that that's very normal and common from at least not just France, but in most folks in the EU, where they would go all the way to a master's before they actually jump into the industry?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I'm not an expert in like, educational systems across the region, but I think if you take away the UK, which is probably special, for Italy, Spain, Germany, I feel like it's pretty normal. Yeah, so we study for 5 years before we start working.
Wow.
Yeah.
So follow-up question after that is, when you did your master's, how did you find living in NYC? And after that, why did you decide to move back to France first before eventually coming to Vancouver? Because I'm sure people will be curious, right? Like, it's like, why didn't you want to stay in NYC after that? Why didn't you want to stay in Paris after that, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a mix of personal and external factors, I think, like macroeconomic factors. So I loved NYC. To answer your first question, I loved studying there. I was at Columbia, which has been and remains the most challenging, rewarding place I've ever been. Incredible university. It was a part of my curriculum to study there, so I was actually enrolled in a master's in France at the Sorbonne, which is a big public university in Paris. So I was always meant to go back. So there was a time limit to my stay, but as soon as I completed my semester at Columbia, I actually realized that I definitely wanted to go back and move back there. My partner was my girlfriend at the time, lived there and was from Queens. But then it's just a series of things. I mean, I did my master's, then I got this internship at Amazon that turned into an apprenticeship of 1 year. And it just was an incredible opportunity that I didn't want to say no to. I looked for jobs in New York. That's the thing.
I see.
And it was really hard to find. It was easier to find in Paris. And then from that, got hired at Brut. And it was, at the time, Brut is not known in North America, but it's a huge startup in France. So, and it was already up and coming at the time. So I was like, I can't say no to this. So kind of career-guided decision not to move back.
Right.
Would I move back anytime? If I'm a father now, so with the child, probably not for a while, but it's definitely a place that's dear to my heart and that has a special place in my heart, New York. Yeah.
Did you do your apprenticeship in Amazon back in France?
Yeah, that's the thing. They hired me in France in there. They have an office in Paris, yeah.
Got it. I think people will probably be, at least listeners from Vancouver and North America, typically speaking, and I think, you know, you've been in NYC and now you live in Vancouver, so you've probably heard people talk about the concept of internships and co-ops and all that sort of stuff. And usually with these large big tech companies like Amazon, and I'm sure even like Brut or back in France or something like that, one of the biggest gateways to even be able to have a chance to get into these large companies is through like, you know, a summer internship or a co-op, right? Where it's like a 4-month work experience at this company where you're focused on a specific niche thing. But usually there's not that many apprenticeships, so to speak. So I'm kind of curious, and I'm sure people would probably be curious about like how your apprenticeship worked and how that might be a little bit different from full-time work.
Right. I mean, it was very close to full-time work. So basically, internships in France are a bit different. They usually last for 1 semester. So it's part of some master's curriculum to do a 6-month internship. So you usually start around March and then it goes all the way through the summer. So it's longer than in North America. And the way it worked is I started this a little bit earlier actually than I should have in January because the need for Amazon was January. And then at the 6 months mark, they turned that into an apprenticeship. And so it lasted a little bit longer and I was paid a little bit more for the remaining like 4 months that I did. I think it was a total of 10 months that I did at Amazon.
Got it.
Yeah. So, it was quite random actually. It wasn't the usual, but I would say that internships are a little bit longer and start earlier in the year in Europe.
Got it. Okay. That being said, I think we've probably established a foundational piece that extends to my next question, which I'm sure we can probably speak for a long time. Like, honestly, the cultural differences between working in the EU versus working in North America could be by itself could be its own episode, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll try not to turn that into its own episode, but I do want to ask you, like, just from your apprenticeship as well as your other work experiences, and then all of a sudden coming here and getting your first taste of what it's like to work in Canada.
Right.
What that cultural difference, like, what do you think? I'll try to formulate my question in a very specific way, but do you think that there is just one big cultural difference or anything like that? And if there is, like, something to just call out right away, what do you think that is?
Yes, there is actually, because you asked me this like about a week earlier, and so I had time to think about it.
Yeah.
And I can talk more about this, but the one thing I will call out is that, Europe and France in particular, I think excels at the individual level. So individuals are very productive, and I know that sounds counterintuitive for French people, but I can tell you it is true, and it is supported by numbers that French people are very productive people, especially in the tech space. That's probably not true. Like, generalities obviously remain generalities across the board, but North America excels at the team level. So it's a completely different thing. And I thought about it because when you start working in North America as a European IC or as a manager, because I did both. Before working as an IC, I built a team in the US, in New York and in LA, and hired and managed people from that country. So I think, and the reason why I'm saying that is there's a reason why the US is the largest, most incredible economy in the world by all, by so many metrics.
Right.
There's a reason why the biggest tech companies are all American. They're like, it can't be that it's just randomness and like luck and like external factors. American companies are extremely good at producing value, and I think that is because they are good at making people work together. They all of the even product management like schools, they have all been developed in the US. Like just like collaboration is a very American thing. France is very good at people being scrappy, extreme ownership. You don't leave until it's done. You constantly think about the adjacent problem that you have individually to solve. And so that makes people very productive in that. So yeah, it's completely different in that sense.
I'm actually very surprised because that's not, it's a very kind of out of the blue answer. Like people wouldn't think, that is the reason why,
Yeah.
which is very interesting, like very fruitful discussion for this podcast episode. I didn't realize that people in North America, like Canada and the US, are more at the team level. But the more I think about it, as you described the answer, I was like, wait, that is technically true. Now, like the way I would say it, and I can't speak for people from EU and France, right? But from our perspective, like I've worked in both the US and I've worked in Canada, very similar cultures, obviously.
Right.
And the way that we would do it is if you were in a product team, let's say, for example, right? Now, as much as like the product manager owns the roadmap, obviously it's still like a whole team discussion. So that roadmap is always discussed by, let's say, for example, are owned together by you as the leader. However, you always have to communicate changes. You always have to get approvals. You always have to, if you have new ideas to add to the roadmap, you can't just add it to the roadmap.
Yeah.
You have to discuss it with the engineering manager. You have to discuss it with your engineers. You have to discuss it with the designer, with political higher levels. There's a lot of intricacies that get involved in multiple different layers.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that is something different that differentiates France or the EU, because I'm trying to figure out like where this team level versus like personal, at least the personal level, you can really see it on a day-to-day basis. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Your cat is then happy over there. Yeah, I mean, again, I've been thinking about it because you asked me that question a while back. And I think it all comes down to like management and the way that companies are being built. And it's just that there is like at the macro level, access to capital is harder in Europe.
Right.
In the tech scene, especially in startups and stuff, like VCs are more risk averse, much more than in North America. There's just less abundance of capital. And so that forces companies to be more lean. So you can't hire as much as you can in North America. That's one first element. I think there's also something to say culturally about, North America, Canada, the US, where it's communication is the biggest of like factors of success, right? Yep. So I think a lot of like collaborative schools and a lot of product management practices are born out of that cultural foundation that you guys have. And so what that creates is that yes, you have bigger teams that collaborate better together. They have practices, they have tools, they have doctrines basically to be better at collaborating, and that in absolute terms creates more value than individuals being very, very productive, but maybe less good at working as teams. So in terms of management, how that translates is that France is definitely more vertical, even in tech space, which obviously is absorbing a lot from the US. That's maybe not that obvious, but I can tell you like we are importing almost every concept from North America, but still it's still a pretty old school vertical way of managing people. And that obviously, I mean, it's like if you look at Google or Amazon, leadership principles, is one of the biggest things, especially for Google, is like to make people feel safe and like to foster, creativity around teams. That is something that might be less privileged in France. And so I think overall, your system is producing more value. But for a French person arriving here, if you're able to kind of like fit in the team aspect of things and like
Yeah.
embrace that, then you are definitely more scrappy, you have more ownership, you can work longer hours, you just are trained to be more productive as a person than the average American or Canadian. And I say that with like no judgment or anything. It's just like I can feel that by working less, I can be more productive here than I
Got
was
it.
in France. Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand, like on a day-to-day basis, or at least like if you were back in that Amazon apprenticeship in Paris, right? What do you think was the key, I guess you could say, like everyday activity at work that you felt like you were doing that really reflected, that work style that was more on the personal, individual level that amounted to productiveness rather than like a team level?
Okay, yeah. So the Amazon example might not be the one that fits best that idea, because Amazon is an American company
Yeah, so
that
they,
is
they
extending,
yeah.
and unfortunately for those big tech companies, the European offices are really like boilerplate teams that execute stuff that has been decided and designed for the most part in the US. And again, like there are a lot of exceptions to that, but mostly I think that's true. Um, but when I started at Brut, it was just like, I mean, I don't I don't think you can be more scrappy than the way that my product role that I got into product, honestly. So I started as a data analyst, and I was in charge of revamping the back office of Brut. So Brut is a video publishing company, so lots of data. It was very messy, our back office. We didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
clear library, and so I was in charge of like cleaning that up. First of all, like I was in charge of cleaning that up. Like that, even that sentence by itself tells you like how, like, okay, you're just thrown in the ocean and you have to
Yeah.
figure it out by yourself.
Right.
And then I identified an opportunity to start building products for like to generate revenue. And I approached my boss, and my boss was like, yeah, this is a good idea. We should start doing it. Let's do a pilot. And that's how I got into building Brut Publisher Solution, which was the BU that I built at Brut. And all of that I did with almost no guidance, almost, like really literally by myself, with resources obviously that I could call out from the company, but it was really limited. And I had to build everything from scratch.
Got it.
So that builds a level of scrappiness that really serves you later on, because you don't have a choice but to swim. You're thrown into the water. I feel like in North America, you have an idea, you can generate revenue. Let's do
Yeah.
another round of raising. Why not? You can raise the money, and then you can hire a product manager, a scrum master, a product owner. Those roles don't barely exist in France, for example. There's the product manager, and then there's the devs,
Right.
the architects, the QA team. But we don't have that many layers of product people. So yeah, I feel like that was a long answer, but I feel like that's how I would differentiate the two spaces.
Gotcha. You're right. And, just to add on to that as well as like what I've seen, probably not just in Europe, but also Canada as compared to like how easy it is to get VC funding in the US.
Yeah,
And-
I
and-
know, right. Different spaces by themselves, actually, Canada and the US. I don't want to like mix them up too much.
Right, it's crazy because I think Canada might be a little bit, maybe not necessarily from a team versus individual cultural level, because I feel like that's more US focused. However, just getting VC funding as a founder or anything similar to that, if you're working in a startup, is much more difficult in Canada, right? As everyone kind of knows. In America, it's really about when you're trying to get pre-seed money. It's not about, oh, are you cash flow positive yet? Are you,
Yeah.
how much ARR of revenue have you gotten? What is your runway? And is your runway like 6 months already and all this stuff? It's just, do you have a good idea? Do you like the idea? Do you trust the team?
Yeah.
And there you go. Here's the money.
Yeah.
Versus Canada, where it's like you have to prove all these things, or a lot of folks are less risk averse because you have to look at all these other factors, right?
Right. Yeah.
It feels very similar to France and the EU as well.
Yeah. I guess that's correct in terms of access to capital. I would caveat that, like, we were talking earlier about like some external macroeconomic factors. I do think that like the last decade was probably an abstraction in reality, and really like a how do you say, gravity defying moment where like money was free basically for a very long time, and there were a series of not bubbles but like just hypes, crypto, and obviously AI now is the next big thing, but even before that, like AR, VR, all of those hypes, the creator economy, which I worked on a little bit.
Yeah.
And so much money was poured into these industries through VC funding. And maybe I do think that we are at an inflection point. It's been really hard to raise money in the past 2 years. We are getting back to
reality a little bit, right?
There was a big reckoning moment, I think, in 2022. I definitely felt it because I helped my company through a Series D funding. I was a bit part of this. My CEO obviously was the one leading the round, but I helped, and I remember how hard it was. So we had the bear market in April 2022.
Yeah.
Then huge inflation with Russia invading Ukraine.
Yeah.
Then they raised the rates in the fall. And all of a sudden money wasn't free anymore.
Right.
So, and I think now we are looking at an industry that is just more cautious of how it spends money. So that might also shift gears a little bit around, the way that teams collaborate and in how you access capital and how you access funding.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's probably why, even though I have this one friend who works on an AI startup, I think he's based in Sweden, where they're trying to match investors to startup founders, right? And obviously the market's much more limited in the EU compared to America, especially with the culture there.
Yeah, the recovery capacity of America is just mind-boggling, honestly. Every time something happens, they just get back on track so much faster than we do. And the pain is probably the pain of economic turmoil in North America, especially in the US, is probably higher on the moment, but it lasts less time than in Europe.
I want to use this topic actually to not really shift gears, but use that as a reason or ask whether or not that was one of the reasons why you decided to switch over to America after you worked in France for a few years.
That's a good question. Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's one of the huge points. So I feel like the tech scene, I could give a 2-minute intro on what the tech scene looks like in France, because it's quite
of course,
unique. So the UK and France, I think, in terms of tech companies, and if you take away Sweden, which has incredible companies like Spotify and stuff, but the UK and France are quite unique because they are very active ecosystems, really vibrant tech scenes. Obviously, they are small. There are less money that is invested in companies funded there, but it's just to have a good tech scene, you need good universities, and you need great access to funding. Those are so that's why the Bay Area is so incredible, because you have Stanford and Berkeley and all of those Ivy League, universities producing founders that then have access to incredible funding, and networks like YC and stuff like that. So France has that to a certain extent. We have very good education.
Mm-hmm.
So we produce great engineers.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a certain level of access to funding. Some of it is private, some of it is actually state related, and that we are getting back on the track of the French cliche. That is really true. There's an institution called BPI, which is basically the French state investing in tech through this vehicle. And it's a huge subsidy for tech companies in France. And my intro made me forget the question that you asked me. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of wanted to ask, what was the reason why? Was that one of the reasons why you switched over to North America?
Yeah, so I will say, every life decision is personal and professional, right?
It's a combination.
Right, it's a combination. Personally, Paris is great. It's a little bit, if you don't know Paris, to live in Paris, not to visit, but to live is a little bit like living in New York, but in Europe. So it's great. There are always something to do. It's incredible. It's probably one of the most vibrant art and food scene in the world. But it's also can be lonely, can be daunting. You can burn out pretty easily. It's very gray. People scream at the wall in the subway. It's very much like New York, honestly. And I'm not the first one to make that comparison. So having a kid, I just wanted to move back to a more, laid back environment, more nature for her. So Vancouver appeared like a great combination of both worlds, because you have a great education system, a great health system, but it's a more, a more interesting forecast in terms of economic opportunities. So yeah, it seemed like the right choice, and my partner had lived here for 6 years. She's English speaking. That's a huge part of our decision to move to an English speaking environment, because France is not great for that. So yeah.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And I guess as we continue this conversation, you're gonna see me like just wanting to ask more about like how did you transition,
Right.
and then I guess what was just moving here like, and then I guess eventually we'll talk about your current experience and what it's been like so far. But just really honestly, I hope that you've liked Vancouver ever since you've moved here. And I'm sure like this conversation can definitely get a little bit less professional because we could talk about all like Vancouver and our dislikes and likes all we want. But before that, just really quickly, where you're currently working at right now in Vancouver and how you've liked it so far.
Yeah. So I'm working at Lululemon. I'm in a team called the GEC, the Guest Education Center. So it's really the care and support team at Lululemon. So what we work on is the product stack that enables what we call educators, which really are support teams, engage with customers on all stuff from brand love to actual, support on digital channels. So email. I work on social. So if you talk to the company on Instagram and somebody answers you, I work on the product strategy that enables that person to do that efficiently. And what I work on specifically is how we are revamping that product stack with AI to make a lot of stuff leaner, a lot of stuff more automated, so that they can work on higher value interactions instead of like tagging and like a lot of manual tasks that they're doing.
Got it. I want to go off the grid a little bit and just ask, like from a AI perspective, right? Because it feels like there's half the reason why obviously a lot of companies are using AI is because they don't want to fall behind, right? As like, now obviously I'm sure people will find like there's a lot of use cases. The board of directors really wants the organization to adopt AI for XYZ purposes, and they want to see like some sort of efficiency improvement. Is that the case of your team, or is that more so kind of like making sure that, from an e-commerce perspective, your organization doesn't fall behind and you leverage AI, right?
Yeah, I think so. The way that Lulu looks at it is we see 3 stages of like AI penetration in organizations, and we didn't invent that model. So the first stage is knowledge, right? LLMs, because they can handle so much text and so much data. If you feed them the proper set of information, they can give you access to company knowledge, and they can also give you access to like industry knowledge. There are so many applications of LLMs that can help a company access knowledge and information. The second stage, so that's like pretty easy to access. I mean, you can get an API key from OpenAI. You can get a RAG framework that you can feed all of your company PDFs to, and a lot of
reads it, performs RAG.
Exactly. A lot of startups are providing this type of services.
Yeah.
The second stage is productivity, as you said. So how do you improve with AI derivative models the productivity of your teams to really make savings and like just on a cost efficiency perspective? And then there are agents, AI agents. So like how do you automate fully complete workflows to completely shift gears on how your company operates with AI? And you're not only talking about cost efficiency, now you're talking about cutting off entire, teams, and like it's just a completely different thing. I think right now where we are at the end of stage 1 for sure. I think Lulu has a very clear understanding of where it stands at in terms of leveraging LLMs to access knowledge. And we are entering phase 2. I think the penetration cycle, and I want to say that actually for people that are interested by AI and that are maybe disillusioned, second language moment, by how slow it might look like it's going in terms of like ChatGPT was invented 3 years ago. It feels like there are new things all the time being created, and yet, when you call TELUS, which I hate, I will say. You don't get a great experience because AI is not really there yet for them. Well, there's a reason for that. Penetration cycles are really long at enterprise companies because they have to de-risk a lot of things. So that is where we at. And I feel like it's honestly an industry standard. Like I don't feel like so many enterprise companies are really much further on the line, automating workflows and building agents for entire teams and stuff like that. That's still a little bit like sci-fi for me.
It's a little bit sci-fi. That's true. And especially when you're talking about like the individual agents. My current company, we're trying to build an AI assistant, right? And that's currently the multiple different agent approaches, what we're doing as well. And each agent, right? Like one agent might be performing query searches on a particular thing to ask certain sets of questions or answer certain sets of questions. And other ones would just be doing like RAG on customer documentation as well. So yeah, it's very, it seems to be like a really streamlined approach, but I do understand a lot of the reasons why a lot of like large companies are trying to adopt that. And not to shift gears too much, but I want to make sure I ask you this before we end. But more so, I guess you could say is like, are you enjoying the current experience you are getting, especially considering that's like one large company or a few large companies, and your main one from France, and then you switch into a large tech company, or not necessarily tech, but obviously like you're in fashion tech, right? In e-commerce in Canada now, seeing like what you're enjoying and what you're disliking from it.
I mean, I built a team of 28 people. Like I hired so many people. I had to let go my entire Indian team in one call. Right? So you go through that. When you have gone through that, you have gone through that. And if you stay at this company, well, you are in this level of comfort that you have proved so much of your own value, and you also have so much ownership over things. And then you shift to a completely different organization with 33,000 employees versus 250. And you are responsible for this little tiny segment that is great. I mean, you have a lot of impact. And if I do my job right, I'm saving the company hundreds of thousands of dollars and maybe setting it on track to generate millions through social, which I believe is the future. But still, it sometimes is hard to just go back to that level of ownership. Even if I embrace it and I understand that it's a completely different world I'm in now. I just like, I miss like building from scratch, ideation and then inception and then like POC. All of that stuff was really fun. It was stressful, but it was really, really fun. So I miss that part. Yeah.
And sorry, before I get to my last question, which I feel like might be the most important, you touched on that last part, which is ideation and POCs and failing fast. Do you kind of refer to that more at the, I guess you probably enjoyed it a lot at the individual level, right? As opposed to maybe perhaps like a team level where the stuff gets blurred a little bit in a team level, and that might be the reason why you miss it a little bit. Is that true?
Right. So we don't do so much ideation at Lulu at the moment because we have a clear roadmap of where we want to go.
Right.
On the execution level, yes, of course, there's a bunch of collaborative work that is happening, and it's great. But it's really, how do we execute on this roadmap step by step? And it's really long term. I mean, like, this is a public thing. Like, Lulu thinks about 5 years plans, which is great. Again, it's a huge company. Like, you have to be realistic about the timeline. At Brut, I built a team that was in charge of building a product line. So like different products that help. By the way, like it was AI, editing, and social analytics products. So we did a video trimmer, for example, that would create short form from your long form content. We did a subtitling tool. We had a predictive score for your TikTok videos. That's the type of stuff that we shipped. And we, as you said, failed fast and built like highly fast recovery capacities at the team level, and I was in charge of that. And that is what I loved, is to create a team that is able to workshop, come up with ideas, experiment on those ideas, test them, talk to the customers, fail, do it again, succeed.
Right, eventually succeed.
It was a short cycle. Yeah, I mean, 4 years, we shipped 3 products, we made millions of dollars, like
wow,
a completely different type. And because we lost also a lot of money, I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it, like Brut became, and this is also public knowledge, and nobody's gonna know about Brut here, but my French people that I'm gonna share that with will know. Brut became profitable notoriously in 2023.
Wow.
And we contributed to that. Yeah, 2023. So, and it's this 8-year-old company. So Yeah, 90% of its life we were wasting and like losing money, right? So
Crazy.
Lulu is sitting on like $7 billion in the bank, also public
Yeah.
knowledge. Completely different level of profits. Like if you don't make enough profits, the stock crashes, and that's the problem, right?
Right. Right.
Like it's a public company, it's completely different.
Right. 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 Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I'm sure Chip Wilson probably agree with that too.
Yeah, you know he has a website. If you're interested, I think it's like, how is it? Is it not? It's not like make Lululemon great again, but he has a website. You know, he only owns 8% of the company now.
Yeah.
But he has a website on which he criticizes the choices that are made at the company level. He's pretty critical of Lululemon.
Oh, I
right
see.
now,
Interesting.
yeah.
He makes it public knowledge.
He makes it public knowledge to his website, yeah.
Interesting.
It's very fun to read, and if you are an employee, it's incredible because obviously he built it, so he has so much knowledge about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a piece of work. Yeah.
Very interesting. I'll take a look at that website. I'm actually curious what he says on there.
Yeah.
Interesting. Last question before we end. And really, I think you already know, but for the audience, right? Like, I think one of the things that I always like to talk about in this podcast is there are so many different ways you can stumble into success as a product manager, right? Or even achieving a PM job or something close to a PM job. And the one thing that I always like to explain to folks is that there's so many diverse backgrounds, non-traditional backgrounds, different ways of stumbling into it. So I guess my question to you is more so for the audience. What are some pieces of advice you think would be good for those who come from a background similar to yours? I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, you have to be coming from Paris, you have to be working in Paris, you have to do a master's in NYC, and then you come here, right? It's more so just like someone that has kind of that non-Canadian background or experience, right? And then eventually found a footing here, or even just trying to break into PM. Like they don't necessarily have to have like non-traditional experience, but anything you could provide would be great.
Okay, cool. I think I'll try to divide this into 3 parts, and I'll try to be short. But there's becoming a PM. There's becoming a PM now in the AI age, and even if you're not going to work around AI, it's going to matter that AI has happened to you and to the world before you wanted to pivot to that career. There is becoming an AI PM, so working like on AI products. And there is succeeding at your career, which is true to PM careers, but also I think true to a lot of other tech careers. So the first thing, how do you become a PM? The one biggest piece of advice that I want to give people is please do not waste any money on certification. It is, but like I don't think it has any value. I have never, like, the Scrum certifications, like all of that. It's just like, consider that rationale. Those, like, product managers are supposed to be oil in the engine. They are supposed to make things work. So certifications come from doctrines and like schools of thoughts to make things easier and more seamless. So it should be common sense, right? Like a Scrum framework, an Agile framework should be common sense. And in fact, is common sense.
Right.
I don't think you need a $20,000 or like even a $2,000 certification to learn how to do the job. There are so many other ways to invest that money for a better ROI.
I agree.
And there's so many free resources. I'm not saying this knowledge doesn't matter. I'm just saying you shouldn't pay for it. You can access it for free.
It's on YouTube, right?
Exactly.
It's everywhere.
Especially now with AI. I mean, like you can ask ChatGPT whatever certification teacher would tell you. So this is my first big piece of advice. If you want to shift to that world, there are a bunch of resources that you can access for free. I mean, obviously there's Lenny's podcast. We were talking about it.
Yeah.
Lenny has a podcast. You can listen to it. Every single guest has their newsletter, their book. Like it's just a Bible of, like, it's a Pandora box of knowledge that you can start accessing. And there's so many other resources you will find online if you start researching it.
Yep.
You can go to Perplexity and be like, hey, drive me like Perplexity, which is an AI tool, search tool. Hey, like, can you build me a 6-month curriculum of free resources to learn the PM job? And it will give you incredible resources that are free. So now if you want to become an AI PM, and that's probably also true if you want to become a PM overall, is one thing that I didn't really do that I would advise people to do is start building now. Like start playing with AI tooling now so that you can understand like what is the cutting edge level at. So for example, it's so easy now, right? It became so easy in the past year. Like you can go to V0 from Versal.
Yep.
You can go to Replit. You can go to Cursor. It's prompt-based software engineering. I don't think people realize just how far we have come in terms of like those tools creating software for you.
Yep.
So start playing with that and like don't. And I would say actually, even if you already are a PM, don't ever stop playing with those because they are incredible and they are teaching you so much that you can't learn through your current job.
Yeah.
You can learn a little bit about, I think if you want to break into AI, it's still important to understand the foundation. So like, I don't know, all of the concepts, right? Neural networks, LLMs, even the stuff that was, I mean, I started really looking into this before I became a PM. So I was interested by AI before I became a PM. I did my master's thesis on what I call generative media, like computer generated media or something, because AI was lame at the time. Like if you talked about AI, it was a lame thing. Like you were kind of like a rookie.
Right.
It changed a lot since then. And at the time, it was just after the big breakthrough of Goodfellow and all of this team from Google on GANs, generative adversarial networks, which was the cutting edge. So this was the AI at the time. Nobody's talking about that anymore. Like because it was so computer heavy. Like you needed so much computing power.
Yeah.
But just learn about neural networks, diffusion models, LLMs, like encoders. There's so much that you need to understand, and it also is completely free resources to know how to do that.
Yeah.
So those would be my two big pieces of advice for AI PMs. And then if you want to be successful at your career, there's a piece of advice from Shreyas Dotis, which is, by the way, one of the biggest voices in the space. I really recommend following him. And like he does have you have to pay for his bootcamp. I didn't do that. I might do that, but that would be the only thing that I would recommend paying for. Maybe is the Product Sense bootcamp from Shreyas Dotis. But he said something about careers that I think is so true, and I've seen it so many times, is that to be successful in your career at an organization, so not talking about founding your company, you need to master three things. You need to master content. You need to be very good at the output that you bring to the company, the value that you create. So if you're a PM, it's your PRDs and your tickets and like your roadmaps, your vision. You have to be very, very good at this. You have to nail it. The second thing is you have to understand how to navigate your corporate structure. So you need to understand what are the leverages of power in your company. What are the flywings? Like what are your flywings? What are the path to more responsibilities, promotions, all of that? And it's those two things already. It's obviously really hard to achieve those two things, right? And usually people have like either one or two, but not a lot of people have three. So the third thing is confidence. You have to be very confident. And confidence, by the way, is also knowing your boundaries, like knowing what your limits are, being vulnerable. All of that for me is a reflection of confidence. But if you have org knowledge, confidence, and content mastery, you are in the top 1%.
Got it.
I have seen very few people that master those three things. I have seen a lot of people that have two things. So they know, for example, if you're very good at what you do and you know exactly how to get to power in your company, but you're not confident, you will never make it.
Right.
You will make it to a glass ceiling at some point. Of course, you will become a very, very valuable IC, but people will never see a leader in you because you are not confident.
Right.
If you are confident and you know your org, but you don't nail content, so many VPs that I've seen hired that are just not technical enough. Well, how can you have the trust of like a dev team or your own team? Like it's just like it's an invitation to not collaborate with you because you're just not credible. Right. So yeah, those would be my advices for people wanting to make it.
I do agree, actually, and before we end this, I do want to add a comment here. Is I do agree that those three items. So I like to follow Shreyas Doshi. Like I follow his newsletter and everything on Medium and stuff. Great content, great person. I do agree. Like I feel like there's probably kind of like a balance there. Like that would probably be the only thing I would push back a tiny bit on, but that's not really pushback. It's just more like adding a comment there. Is like there's confidence in a sense of culture confidence, of just being ensuring that, you know, the people that are relying on you as a PM, they can rely on you and trust you on your decision making.
Yeah.
Versus and exerting that type of confidence versus you being overconfident, because at the end of the day I feel like the foundations of a good PM is humbleness and curiosity too.
No, yeah, 100%.
And just like understanding, like wanting to be curious and test the new things, and willing to fail fast and be wrong, and work through that and all that stuff, right?
100%, yes. So that's very good, because just by being French, I think the default cliche is that we are always overconfident, and we can be patronizing and stuff. So do not do any of that. Do not mansplain a conversation. Like, I think for me, confidence, you are somebody that I consider very confident, but you never struck me as someone that is overconfident or patronizing. It's the opposite. The best way to shine, and I've learned that as a leader, as a team leader, is to make others shine. This is going to be the best reflection of you on your senior management. Never bring anyone down. Always create a platform for people to shine. They will be grateful to you, and you will appear as a great leader. And being vulnerable is the best reflection of confidence that I've ever seen. Like, there's no... So I agree 100% with you on like what makes a good PM, and I do think that confidence is a feature of that. It's not opposite.
Love that. No, I mean, like it feels weird to kind of get the compliment back to me to end the show, but like...
Oh, definitely, man. Yeah, you're great. What you're doing for the community here is great, and big shout out to you. I found my job because of your community, so really grateful.
Well, I appreciate that, but I know that there's still like a long road ahead for kind of PM Hive and what we need to work on still, because it feels like there's so much more potential for the community and how that really converges with elevating people's PM careers. But right. I feel like at least us recording this podcast episode and sharing that and sharing our knowledge and our experiences at least does a good step too. So once again, I'm using that as kind of to close off on today's episode. So thank you again for today's episode, and appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome. Yeah,
it's a great time. So everyone, please do I'll link in Sam's LinkedIn.
I have a TikTok account that I share stuff on. So I'm building a little thing on the side. So yeah, if people want to follow me there, would love it.
It's perfect. So I'll do that and take a look at his links there and his TikTok. And once again, tune in for the next episode. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, man.